The main idea that he wants to inculcate is this is the rational age, and individuality and rationalism is the keynote of this culture today. And in these chapters, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, and also subsequently, he is trying to show if reason became the governor of life, what would be the consequences? And what are the limitations of reason as a governor of life in a collective life? This we are dealing with the collective growth. This is in old title of this book was Psychology of Social Development. That was the old title. This human cycle was subsequently changed, but the old title was Psychology of Social Development. In the first book that he wrote about politics, the ideal of human unity, he developed the constitutional power aspect and the political and economic aspect of collective life. And here now, in this book, he is developing and trying to point out how the collectivities have been also psychologically developing. And what are the psychological elements that have governed or that have been governing the collectivities from the beginning of history? Well, he's showing now here that we are in the rational age, and in these chapters that we are trying to study, he wants to point out that if reason, as many people want that reason should become the governor of life, well, he is pointing out that that would not be a complete government, a perfect government. That is one difficulties of that task. Secondly, that reason is not the only faculty in man which gives him knowledge. There are other faculties in man also which give him knowledge. And there is no reason why reason can be given primacy over infra-rational movements of human consciousness. But there is no reason why other faculties which are equally capable of giving knowledge to man should be put on the shelf, so to say, and reason alone should be allowed to dominate collective or individual life. You see, that is second point he makes out. Thirdly, makes out that whenever you put life versus reason, it is life that wins and not reason. When you put life and reason, and that is what it will come to ultimately in collective life. When you take collective life, it will ultimately come to, well, life trying to follow a line and reason trying to dictate another line. So it will come to that sort of thing, you see, that reason versus life. And in that conflict, 90 times or 99 times out of 100, it is life that wins. Thirdly, that when reason is actually allowed to master, the master is never complete. Even if it is allowed to master, the mastery will remain limited. It is not able to extend its limit, so to say, in a way which will say, give you complete satisfaction, and now it has got complete mastery. That incapacity reason has got. And secondly, reason is has two sides. One is pure reason, and another is interested reason. Reason interested and reason pure. Well, the difficulty comes in when reason tries to remain on its pure functioning, tends to be away from life. When it gets interested, it tends to be subordinate to life. It's not able to make itself felt against life when it is interested. When it is pure, well, it kicks out life and says, well, I live on my own. Well, on my own means practically nothing to life. Well, you may live in your own life, would say to reason. You may live in your heaven. And reason would say, I'm quite happy in my heaven when it is pure. It creates its own abstract world in which it remains without any direct contact, any infinitesimal effect upon life, but practically it is not able to catch hold of and turn life, you see, the direction of life. Now, and if life actually did become rational on a large scale, he is pointing out that it would lose all the dynamic elements of life. Life would lose its dynamic nature, being dominated by reason. And therefore, he is pleading in the further chapters that come 13th and 14th that therefore the problem is not governing life by reason, but problem is to find out what is man. Is he mind? Is he only life? Is he only bundle of desires, ambitions, and The self, that is Kamanamaya Purusha, the desire soul, only body or more. Well, cultures were in the past, which started with the basis that man is mind and intellect, aesthetics, mind and politics and seeking and philosophy, and from Greek culture and other cultures. And they did not attain the degree of perfection that was expected of them. So it is the problem even for collective life is to find out the reality behind this collective soul, and it will be found out by eliminating what has already worked and has been found wanting. Reason has been tried as a governor of life and has been found wanting. Therefore, he says the time is right now when it is necessary to find out whether reason should be the only element. Then we seek for supra-rational, he says. If you seek the supra-rational, you will find there is religion, which deals with the supra-rational practically and refuses to come under the domain of reason in its dictation. There is aesthetics, for instance, which is certainly irrational, to put it mildly, or it is beyond reason. Aesthetics has nothing to do with reason. So there are departments and fields of activity of human consciousness in which reason is not allowed to dominate, because if it dominated, there would be, well, a stalemate, or there would be no progress of the human spirit. But the very fact that there is something supra-rational, an activity which is cultural to man's collective life, shows that that direction points the way to the real discovery of the human self. That if we were to discover human self, that we must try to discover the supra-rational. Well, that is summarily what we try to see what it is. Now, reason wants, if we study the working of reason, we will find that reason wants to master nature. But we have to remember that reason itself is a product of nature. Reason itself is something which nature has produced. Even reason is itself nature. And only it is, you can say, nature that has become self-conscious. Nature becomes self-conscious is man, mental consciousness. It has therefore capacity for experiment and finding out the generalization based upon its observation and experiments. But behind all the instrumental working, man, when reason awakes in his consciousness, feels that he is independent of this instrument. There is something in him which is independent and free from the working of this instrument, that he is using this instrument, but he is fundamentally free. And I quote his sentence: this turning of consciousness upon itself, when reason awakes into expression in life, and on things which man represents, has been the great crisis, a prolonged and developing crisis in the terrestrial evolution of the soul in nature. The soul is evolving in nature from inconscience of matter to a greater and greater rising degree of consciousness. More and more the petal of consciousness is awakening. Life, details and further petals of life with incipient mind, and mind proper, first working on the physical basis of mind, then vital mind, then pure mind. So that it has been a gradual growth from inconscience to a rising degree of consciousness. And this is now the crisis which evolution has reached. This turning of consciousness upon itself, first creating of a point of subjectivity where the consciousness would have a subjective, self or subjective point of reference. That was first labor of nature, to create an individuality. After having created the individuality, the second work is to create in it a consciousness which will turn upon itself. Well, that crisis comes when reason comes and takes hold of the process of evolution. But at present, the self-conscious soul in mind, Manomaya Purush, mental being, is struggling to arrive at some ordering of itself. It has come to mind, but it has not turned to the soul. Immediately the mind has come to the front. The reasoning faculty is trying to set the house in order in the collective life. And we have therefore to remember here, when reason is trying to order the whole of individual and collective life, that it is not the only instrument of knowledge available to man. Man learns through action, through perception, through aesthetic capacity, through sensation, through impulse, through will, through imagination. Many avenues of knowledge are available to man, not only reason. Through so many sources, man learns, man grows, man understands, and man has knowledge. But intellect has a great advantage over all those. First advantage is that it is detached. Power of mind or reasoning is detachment. It is not concerned with any fulfillment of desire or impulse. It has a power of being a witness, an analytical power, to see impersonally. And it exists for the sake of knowledge, while others mostly exist for the sake of action. And power of reason is that it's not easily carried away by action and by impulse or by any movement of nature. It can watch, it can study, it can accept, it can refuse, it can modify, alter, improve, combine things, indulge, repress, and try to create out of all these its actions an organized perfection. This reason can, well, make an effort to do. Reason gives man science, as he says in this part of the work, science, conscious art, and invention, on page 126. So it speculates, it reasons, and it can also sound the potentiality, truth that are potential, what can happen, not what has happened, what actually is, but also what is possible. And this is therefore man's, in one sense, a power that tries to dominate and can be called a sovereign capacity in that respect. But this sovereignty of reason over all the parts of man and also in the extent of his collective life has been always partial. Reason has not completely been able to govern thoroughly the whole field of individual or collective life. And one of its rivals is faith. And still, we find that in normal life, if reason begins to dominate, then life or vital being, imagination, emotion, aesthetic being, ethical being, all have to come under the domination of this reason. And when keenly observe the collective life and its flow, then we find that reason is not its Godhead. Reason is not that which life worships. It is man worship rather. Man does not, he is not after what is rational, but he is the worshipper of life. Life is the Godhead of man, and secret life, secret will of the human individual and collectivity is life. And it takes intellect, it uses reason, but reason so far as it can serve life. The spirit of man in his individual and collective life is interested in reason to the extent that reason can, well, serve the purpose of life. If reason serves life, it is all right. If reason is allowed to act purely in its own right, it will seek for truth for its own sake or reality in its own self. Life, if it wants reason to cooperate, it would seek reality for utility. It will say how far it is going to be useful to me. That is the question which life will put to reason. So reason will have to choose between either a pure action of itself or an interested action. Man of reason is subject to the tyranny of ideas also. Generations of societies are carried on, carried away by ideas. And ideas are triumphant for time. But as time passes, ideas diminish in power, capacity to rule life. And because ideas themselves are partial also, and idea is not the whole truth of life. Idea cannot carry and convey to the human individual and collective life the whole truth of life. They cannot govern life. And this is the imperfection which applies to all rational systems when they are applied to life. Humanity has stumbled from experiment to experiment. And it also proceeds from observation, experiment, action, error, stumbling, and arriving at something. Some people argue that this way you go on by error and correcting yourself and method of error and you see correction. One day reason will arrive at perfect organization of life. Well, he says that is only a faith and a hope. You cannot be sure because reason has been working for sufficiently long time. I pointed out in one of my evening talks that reason is working in humanity for last 2,600 years nearly. Since the age of Socrates and Plato, who are historical figures, you see. 2,600 years ago, reason has been quite developed, keen, comprehensive, subtle, pure, and capable of handling deepest and profoundest problems of life. And yet, reason has not given any such a solution that you can say now, in future it is going to do something more striking. During this 2,600 years, it has not shown us a remarkable way of solving fundamental problem. What it has done is applied knowledge to life and made life more, you can say, tolerable, more progressive, more rich, and so on. But it is only applied the discoveries of one corner of knowledge, material science, and applied it to life. Well, so far as the fundamental problem, what is man, what is life, what is the relation between man, is there a reality between man and man, or between collective and individual, or between a reality and this world? The reason in the intermediate period has not arrived at more, cogent or more satisfying solution than those people 2,500 years back. So that it's a hope and a faith, he says. Philosophy, science and learning and arts, etc., in modern era, even science, have certainly advanced knowledge and have certainly claimed many things, but reasons working at government of life has not been a success. Science has given us only classification, mechanization, discovery, but is only of the physical world one corner of knowledge. Abysses of truth lie below matter even, apart from above matter. Abysses of knowledge, I'm quoting his sentence sometimes now and then, where reason is unable to deal with life in its complexity and its integrality, and is compelled to analyze, break up, and create artificial classifications and work upon a very limited data. This is the difficulty of human reason. As it were, two worlds come into existence when pure reason tries to work upon life and matter and world material. World of ideas, proper to the mind and reasoning and intellectual being, and the world of life, well, which escapes from the full control of this reason. Reason can certainly serve life, but then it abdicates its sovereignty. When it serves life, then it abdicates its sovereignty. When reason tries a higher action, well, it separates itself from life, as we saw. Sometimes ideas are thrown on the current of life, but life does with them what she likes. Ideas are not able to take the current of life and turn it this way or that way. It is the life does what it likes with them, and life wriggles out of any system which reason prepares for it to hide, bound, or to encircle it. The root of the difficulty is at the very basis of life, it seems, there is something which must be called either infinite or absolute. And it seems as if everything is trying to express that infinite or that absolute. Not each type, but each individual. Each individual is trying to express this infinite and the absolute. Because each is filled with infinite potentiality and also capacity of variation, and it seems to be actually at work. And this is very baffling to human reason. This is too much for human reason to tackle, too baffling, too complex, too rich. Human intelligence, mankind representing this unlimited potentiality, And in human individual, each power seems to be seeking after its absolute or its infinite in its own way. And it is restless when it is made to go undergo the control of reason. When you say, oh, you must, well, it will simply rise in revolt. If artistic capacity is controlled by reason, or ethical movement or emotional movement is controlled, well, immediately it is absolutely dissatisfied. That part doesn't get fulfillment. The point is development and fulfillment. Each man therefore seems to be unique, and reason can only be at best a minister but not a sovereign controller of human psychology or collective life even. Then he points out now in the next chapter, office and limitation of reason, that that which manifests itself through the intellect in humanity or human being seems to be something more than intellect, spirit or a soul. And perfection of the human being does not seem to consist in his being a rational creature. A rational man necessarily is not the perfect type of human being. And intellect helps man, certainly, and it studies all the other functions of even human psychology, apart from studying outer physical material nature and prying into the secret of material energy. It gives self knowledge to some extent and is certainly a guide for a certain period. It purifies certain parts of the being that are derived from the animal origin, from which man has come into process of evolution. It has to some extent, therefore, legislative power. It can legislate that life shall not do this, or mind shall not move in this direction, or emotion will not do a certain thing, or impulse shall not be expressed in a particular way. It tries to legislate for other powers. It has legislative power, but it is limited in its capacity of carrying out its will, and also in its knowledge about how far to legislate and how far not to legislate. It doesn't know where to stop. It thinks that it must cut everything to a pattern, and when it tries to cut everything to a pattern, it finds that life has gone out of it. When it represses the vital being may, if it is weak, submit to the dictation or the arbitrary power of reason. But then life itself would have. Life would go on strike, so to say, as they say. And then the mind might be very perfect, only it would be lifeless. That's all. These samples I have seen actually in Mahatma Gandhi's ashram. You were surprised to know between 1916 and 19. When I was in Ahmedabad, there were people who remained in his ashram and carried out certain, the vows, as I say, the yama and niyama, rules and regulations which were necessary to join the ashram life. Now, they were very sincere in one part of their being, so they carried out. And what I saw was that their control was, an imposed control for which they seemed to pay it with all the joy because they couldn't enjoy that, you see. And to them, the greatest surprise was that our group, which belonged to this side, Sherundo's ideal of life, we never thought of control. We never thought of control. It was delight to control yourself. And we broke all rules when we thought, oh, it didn't matter to break rules. But when it was necessary to impose discipline, we imposed harder discipline than those people. Far harder work. 18 hours of work we could put for the Congress session was on. They broke down in 3 days. We lasted 1 month.
When was this?
1920, 1918, 16 to 20. You see? Broke down. They can't last. Same age, my own fellows, they couldn't work. It is not because they are not good. the attitude, you see, imposed such a thing that life seemed to be, as it were, held under some check and not fully capable. Well, after all, when you control also, you control because of delight in control, isn't it? I mean, otherwise there is no point in control. This is what he's trying to point out here, that this legislative power of mind, crushes the life. Reason can turn, outward. It can also, if it is possible for it to do, turn upward also and inward. When it turns upward, then it sees world of ideas. Ideas which are not merely abstractions but forces. And reason can give them intellectual form, but reason feels that they are forces. For instance, idea of liberty, idea of beauty, idea of truth, idea of love, self-denial, collectivism. Each has a truth. And when mind comes in contact with that world of idea by looking up, it knows this is a world of power. Only it gives it an intellectual form. Now, the progress of individual and social movement of man is a movement of self-illumination and self-harmonizing with this intelligence as its leader, mind and reason as its leader. He has to govern his lower being anyhow, if by nothing else by his mind, because there is a low infra-rational being in man. Instincts have to be governed by reason, impulses also have to be ordered into rhythmic movements. And still, the difficulty comes in when this control is imposed, that each moral tendency also tends to divide the human being. Because the movement of each ethical tendency is one pulling in one way, the other pulling the other way. Justice, charity, self-help, altruism. You take any and then you find that one contradicts the other. Universal love. Then what love dictates, the justice will come in, and it is a activism, passivism. Well, which is now between the two, the ethics divides the man. In artistic movement, there have been experiments. Men have tried various constitutions to govern collective life: autocracy, monarchy, military aristocracy, mercantile oligarchy, and all kinds of things, veiled plutocracy, bourgeoisie, and proletarian forms, and so on. All these have been tried. It is all experiment of self-formation and self-experience and self-activization which is taking place, really speaking, to find self-realization, to realize the self, to find which is the self that one has to realize in individual and collective life. And there, when you watch these growth experiments that have been done by society from the beginning of history, then the place of intellect can be seen to some extent with some clarity. That it has two parts. One is this dispassionate part, which seeks truth for its own sake, knowledge for its own sake, and then tries to create a law out of its perception of truth. Another part of the same disinterested or dispassionate intellect gets interested. Then its desire to govern life by the truth, and it wants to give a law of life, law of action to life. It also wants to get knowledge, this interested part of man's intellect. But it says that it must be for life. Whatever truth or reality I get must be directed towards life or must be brought into life. And in this, the intellect goes wrong because it compromises from its true functioning. In the first, you have got the perfect purity of its operation. In the second, it becomes partial. It becomes sometimes interested and passionate. Even if it remains disinterested, the knowledge or the idea, when applied to life, becomes a plaything of the forces in life, over which reason afterwards has no control. Once the idea is let into life, it takes its own course. Mahatma Gandhi would say non-violence. Throw the idea in life, but life does what it likes with it afterwards. And some fellows get killed somewhere in some corner. Nobody knows how it happens. Play of forces over which reason afterwards has no control. Science is good and harmful both, because it has drawn mankind together. It has crushed mankind also with its commercialism, and even idealistic philosophy and good religion have their good and bad points, and both can be seen if you look at the growth through which societies or collectivities have passed. Thus, if you watch, reason seems to be an imperfect light, and its functioning or capacity of being applied to life is limited, restricted, and it becomes very often subject to what it studies, when particularly when it applies its energies to life. And when it applies itself to life, reason can justify anything. See, any standpoint, opposite viewpoints, and can give excellent reason for contrary things. This is what life reason has been doing. It decides according not to reason, but according to something else in that case. And I think that is what Bergson said to the European philosophic world, that reason acts only as an advocate of an instinct of life which automatically chooses intuitively something. You see, and reason comes only to support that, whatever the intuition of life has chosen or selected. You see, reason only supports. Each one believes that his reason is right and other reason is wrong. That is exactly the relativity of rational standpoint, you see. You can see that in a legal case when two advocates plead the case. You see, it's so simple to see. Apart from any philosophical or political question, if you see in a law court, the same case and the same facts being argued by two people and quite cogently, legitimately, and rationally, two people coming to contrary conclusion on the same basis, the same evidence. Now, some people believe that collective reason means collective mind, like intelligence of, large masses of persons. When it progresses, it will make good all this deficiency of human reason. Well, it is it's a pious hope, you see, because reason itself, as it is constituted, cannot grasp the truth, because truth itself is infinite, and it grasps something of that truth, and then also that which it feels immediately necessary. He doesn't even take something one by one, but takes what is most necessary. Man moves by succession of steps, not all at once. And reason justifies now this, now that, whatever is being accepted, well, it comes to justify. And in one sense, you can say that is its value because it keeps up the man in this resolution which he has taken. Whatever decision is taken, he is supported by reason and feels that he is right. And this gives him a sort of, intellectual, you can say, support to go on with whatever he has decided. It could even support two conflicting views, one after another, sometimes in the same individual. So reason builds, changes, and then destroys, and man thus marches by handling the finite bit by bit towards the infinite. Reason cannot get at the root nor at the totality, at the very root nor at the total aspect of what is manifesting here. Purely rational life would be deprived of the most powerful dynamic sources of life. Rationalistic society could not come into being because if it came into being, it would be sterile. It is true. Roots of human life are irrational, either below or above, supra-rational. By slow enlargement of reason, reason itself can arrive at the perception of a higher possibility, perhaps a higher life or a divine life. Reason can, if it just looks up and steadily tries to watch what is above. In this chapter, he tries to give us some idea of reason and religion. Because man, when he comes on the scene of history, his main business is not to survive only. You see, people always talk as if the main purpose of life was to survive. Well, now, that is the first step. But as he says, that is not his main business. It is his first business, but not his chief business. He has pointed out in Foundation of Indian Culture or somewhere that it is one's first business, but it is not his chief business. And here, it is not merely to make a place for himself or to develop as the animals do develop, go on multiplying himself and so on. like the beehive and the anthill, for enjoyment or even for mere efficiency. Man has to arrive at a higher harmonized inner and outer perfection. He has to arrive at a harmonization of his inner self and arrive at an outer perfection. Must culminate in the discovery of the reality of himself. Now you take the first Hellenic idea, he says. Greek. They were philosophic, aesthetic, moral, and physical culture governed by reason. A pure intellectual idea, man's an intellectual culture, man as an intellectual being, and then try to arrive at some kind of perfection of an intellectual being with a harmonizing, with a integral development of all the parts, well, in consonant with the demands of reason. Now, the modern ideal is not the same. Modern ideal successful economic civilization which is governed by collective reason, organized knowledge for mankind, and both these ideals are insufficient. The Greek ideal and the modern ideal. Greek ideal was aesthetic, philosophic, moral, and physical culture governed by reason. Modern ideal of successful economic civilization governed by collective reason and organized knowledge of mankind applied by science or applied through science. Hellenic mind was different from modern because it was philosophic, aesthetic, and political. Modern mind is scientific, economic, and utilitarian. This is from his own words. This is so as to claim the definite opinion which he has expressed about these cultures in this book. In both, man is accepted as partly mental and partly physical being. Man is an intellectual or mental being. But in reality, man is a developing spirit, trying to fulfill himself in forms of mind, in forms of life, and in his body. He has in him the hope of kingdom of heaven within and the city of God on earth. That is his expressed hope, and not now when he was not as developed as he is now. That is the breaking in of a light of knowledge even from his early career. If soul is the true sovereign, then there must be a superior range of being with its own proper powers available to man, by which man can fulfill himself as a soul. Then is it necessary or would it solve the problem if we say that we want to evolve human society into a spiritualized typal society? A type, man as a type of spiritual being means following a religious idea. It would not be the correct solution because each man has his own peculiar nature which reflects the element of the divine nature, and he must be allowed to grow within that element. And if you try to make a typal spiritual society, all will have to be cast into one type. All will have to be cast into one mold. Each individual's variation will not have a chance of fulfillment if you cast or make an attempt to create a typal spiritual society in which each one will be a type of the main archetype, so to say. Take the main archetype and you create types. Well, you can't have an ashram made only of Gandhis, for instance. You wouldn't succeed because the variation would go. Typal principle is not the foundation of new society or an ideal society because the type is not integral. Type is restricted to one particular mold because each contains the potentiality of all within himself, and which will come out is uncertain. You see, each individual contains all the potentialities within himself, and you have to make an allowance for any potentiality to come out, to express itself, to manifest itself. Ideal society can be formed, he says in quotation, by evolution of the spiritual ranges of our being and unmasking of the inherent light and power and the divine capacities. When that is done, then we can create ideal society, or as he calls it, the spiritual society. And spiritual ranges of our being do exist. The supra-rational, rational and the infra-rational are the parts of being in collective life and in individual life. Collectivity has gone through the infra-rational stage, it is now in the rational stage, and it can look up to the supra-rational. The individual has within him the infra-rational, derived from material and animal origin. He has developed the reasoning power, and he has in him the potentiality of evoking into dynamic movement supra-rational powers. These are now two sides. Reason stands between the two, supra-rational and the infra-rational. And infra-rational below is infinite, the supra-rational above is infinite. In between, reason is finite. Its only function is to join the two, that is inconscient, you see. Reason stands between these two and it enlightens the infra-rational and looks up to the supra-rational, makes the human being control the infra-rational and make him look up to the supra-rational. If we take the range of the supra-rational experience available or possible to man, we are immediately drawn to the religious experiences of mankind. Those experiences, religious experiences, are all beyond the range of reason. And when reason comes and plays upon these experiences, it has one good office which it can perform. One, it can remove ignorant superstitions, survivals of the barbarous condition of man's primitive state. Or sometimes when it comes, it harms the religious experience by trying to explain it and explain it away. Really speaking, it can't explain. You see, that is what very often the scientists try to do nowadays, particularly these new psychology scientists and so on. They try to talk about things about which they have themselves no experience, and they are trying to make of it a material or a physical science which it cannot be made, because the whole subject matter is not material, it's psychological. And still they are trying to arrive at observations and generalizations from outside. And Sri Aurobindo, long ago, 50 years back, he wrote in one of his early writings, not even in magazine Arya, but before, that psychological is a science in which one proceeds from the knowledge of oneself to the knowledge of others. And unless you have knowledge of yourself, you cannot know others. It is very axiomatic almost that you must know what you are before you can judge what somebody else is or what human being in an impersonal sense is. But this is when it patronizes religious experience and tries to explain, well, it sometimes does harm to the religious experience itself. And it tries to make use of religion for its own purpose. There was one time when there was an effort to start a rational religion. I think it was, what was the name of that German philosopher? Scientist. They started. There was a rational series of rational books. You see, they wanted to bring out books of science at cheap prices, 5 cents, 10 cents, and so on. And Haeckel, yeah. Ernest Haeckel. Yeah. You see, he wrote two books. Oh, I remember still. God is a gaseous invertebrate. He wrote one of his books, I remember. God is a gaseous invertebrate. And they started a society to propagate scientific religion. Well, that was one joke. It couldn't last more than 15 or 20 years. But anyway, it had its time one day. Well, to ask for physical proof or satisfying material reason for religious experience is meaningless, because the whole essence of religion is discovery of something which is immaterial. An immaterial spirit which is free from matter, or spirit which is not limited to matter. Apart from its outer machinery of creed, etc., religion is a search for God and finding of God, relation between man and God, and to live that relation out in life. That is the real function of religion, apart from the machinery of credo and outer social organization. And this God knowledge, he says, is gained by, in quotation, you see, self-transcendence, consecration, aspiration, and experience. You have to have experience of it and no mere mental image made of it or intellectual generalization. Faculties for that knowledge are not imagination and logic or rational judgment, but intuition, inspiration, revelation, which leap down from above upon the human consciousness or human being. For instance, he says love of God, delight in God, or surrender to the divine. These are nothing rational about. Either it is or it is not. That's all. There is no rationality about these things. Reason is only a subordinate and a secondary power in the realm of religion. It cannot lay down any law for it. It can give logical reasoning and inferences and analogies, but it is the weakest part of religious life and religious belief. Because religion is not a system, but only a intellectual form, and you can seek the real form through that form. But that must be only by other means. When you actually proceed to seek the realization or reality of religion, you don't proceed by logic, you proceed by other means. In governing the infrarational regions of life, reason certainly has a place. If it comes and throws out superstition or falsehood or false belief or make belief, well, that is its positive contribution even to religious life. Effete forms of religion, reason can destroy, and reason has played a good part in developing the true religious spirit in man. But even infrarational parts have a right to seek their fulfillment being transformed. Even the infrarational are not totally to be crushed or simply kept down, but infrarational seeks its justification by, being allowed to transform themselves. The 14th chapter deals with supra-rational beauty. Now, where is the time? Well, I think I better stop there. 9 o'clock. Past 9? Is it right? Let's see. It's about 7. Huh? I think you better too much. The application of reason as a governor of collective life would be only a partial, attempt and partially successful. It wouldn't succeed, and then it would leave also other parts not feed for the fulfillment.
Is the emotional sphere contained in the of light? Where's the emotional sphere?
It is between the rational and the vital.
Well, that is a very important sphere. I mean, its laws are according to itself. It
Yes.
doesn't come within nature.
No, it should not. You see, really speaking, emotion is only for experience and not for action.
Yeah.
That's one has to remember. That's all. If you remember that, one will not go wrong.
Oh, for experience.
Emotion is only for experiencing emotion, not for action. Action has to be decided by some other faculty. You can add color of emotion afterwards, but not decide the action by emotion. You follow the difference?
Yeah.
Yes. When you feel patriotic, for instance, now it's an emotion. You shouldn't act. You have to calmly judge. You may be one. And if you simply rush, there'll be nothing, no result. But if you say, no, this will now succeed, or this is the right way to do, you perceive by some other faculty than emotion what is to be done, either by an inspiration or by an intuition or by logic. But you find out what is to be done by other faculty. When that is decided, emotion will give the right color and push. Emotion can give a good push to the work, but you should not decide the action by emotion. You follow the difference?
Yes.
Yes, that's it. Emotion is good because emotion gives a power which no other human faculty can give.
Yes.
Yes, but it should not decide. No. That's it. It should only, decision coming from somewhere else, emotion can give its push to that. And it would be a unique push.
But one can often be controlled by their emotions.
Huh?
One is often controlled by their emotions, aren't they? You know, emotion of love, or what
Oh,
we call
yes.
love.
Yeah, it is only for experience.
Emotion of-
It is only for experience in the inner subjective self, that is to say. It is to be experienced. That's all. It should make an experience and not drive to action, drive to mental conclusion. For instance, even intellectual conclusion, one should not arrive at on the basis of emotion, because there you will go wrong. It is going into a function field where it is really not.
You mean it shouldn't?
Shouldn't. That's the point. It happens, but it's not right. That's what I want to say.
I understand.
It shouldn't happen, really speaking. If emotion is to be really fulfilling its true function, it must give experience. And that experience is great, very wonderful experience. It is very profound and deep and very, capable of changing human nature. But it must not go into mind and decide thinking, or go into action and decide what is to be done by emotion. That must be decided on other grounds and by other faculty. And emotion can help that afterwards when that is done. But emotion by itself is for mainly for experience and giving, as Sharundo says in one of his writings, color to your temperament. Emotion gives a color to your temperament.
Mhm.
It is like a color. You see, a temperament which is sweet, strong, clear, quiet, profound, serious. Now that comes from a settled emotional, movement. It is not moving. It is a color given to the character, you see. And that gives a very important part to human character, very important part. Emotion lends a very important element to human character.
Well, I don't see how we can live without it.
Yes.
We're going to be human beings. And that's why reading impoverishes the emotional life. If you allow.
It isn't to dominate over emotion, yes, of course.
And that's why I think institutional life is so devastating, because it dries up the very sources of emotion.
Mm.
That emotion finds a way up somehow.
It must go deep, not remain sentiment or surface feeling. When it goes deep, well, it touches and enters the psychic being. And therefore, people who are truly emotional, I mean true emotion, not sentimental people, because it's only surface play and immediate dramatic action, more or less, you see, and disproportionate to the occasion sometimes, the sentiment. But if it is deep emotion, it can lead one to the psychic being straight. Because the power of the emotion is love, faith, surrender, you see, total self giving. These are the powers required by the psychic being. An emotion is capable of giving that. Only it must be at the depth of the being, not on the surface of nature. You see?
Yes.
When one goes deep, deep inside, and from there he feels a faith or a love or a need for surrender or self giving, well, that is exactly what the psychic being is. And that is what the psychic being does. So, emotion is nearest to the psychic being at its depth. The depth of emotion corresponds to the touch of the psychic being.
Oh, that's why Ram Krishna said, if you cry for
Yeah, that was one way of putting that. If you awaken your psychic being, true emotional being, that will awaken your psychic being.
Mm-hmm.
Only it's not necessary to cry, but still, it means that you feel the intense aspiration.
Yes.
What it meant was intense aspiration.
Yes.
No, because many people make a rule of this outer dramatic crying and weeping, as if they think that is the essence of spirituality, you see.
You get it?
Yes, the essential of love. I'll stick my car underneath the shed there, Purani shop, tell me write it down, think about it done.
Hmm.
created a tremendous jump from
Yes.
the stale dogma that existed
Yes.
at that time into what was supposed to be the new hope, which was science.
Yes, which is individual reason and individualism, you see,
And
and
one of
rationality.
the things that, quite a number of the Victorian,
Yeah.
in the, one of those days, the days of Darwin and all, if you wanted to teach at Oxford or Cambridge, you had to be a priest.
Yes,
You
yes.
had to be in the Church of England.
Yes.
And quite a number of these priests who were basically teachers and
Priests at all.
not priests at all became agnostics because their scientific deliberations proved to them
Yeah, this hunt and
religion
fish.
and forcing down their throats for the hundreds of years was all wrong, see? And so because of the mistake of men, they blamed God, which is often the case.
Gone, though there is a lot of domination there in old universities still. In the new universities less, but in the old universities still there is something of that element, you know. It's religious. It's much gone now.
Well, you don't have to be a priest anymore.
No, that is finished.
Years ago.
Yes.
Although I'm trying to think of what he's saying. There was a book about autobiography. He was the father of Virginia Woolf and two or three other very sons and daughters. And this man became I can't remember what his name is now, but he became an agnostic about the age of 35. He was a preacher, you see, and taught at Oxford. And he was a follower of Darwin. Of course, Darwin was the simplest guy in the world. He was so
Yes, simple.
simple and retiring, and he never saw anybody but his personal friend. He caused about as much emotion as anybody could.
No, I tell you, it has a queer history. I found it at Cambridge that he tried to become the what you call the provost, you see.
Yes.
And then there was a king wanted him to be the provost. And the whole faculty was against him and he couldn't become. They outvoted the king.
Well, the most amazing thing I think was Galileo.
Yeah.
Galileo, you see, became interested in
Astronomy.
astronomy. What was the man's name? The Hungarian one that invented the concept that the solar system, that the sun revolved around the earth.
Wasn't that Galileo?
No, he was a follower, but the man's name was anyway. And he had been writing treatises along this line, and he had been pretty well hammered down by the Jesuits who controlled the education. And finally, he had a very good streak of luck. One of his best friends became Pope. So when this man became Pope, he sent this article to the Pope and cleared it. And yet the Jesuits were so strong that the Pope couldn't even protect him. And of course, they forced a confession. They gave him the Inquisition and all that sort of thing, and he recanted and all this sort of thing, and he died and more or less disgraced and so forth. But actually, the Pope wasn't strong enough to kill him. Did you ever read his trial?
No.
They didn't. They just said it was against the laws of the church.